The poverty resource definition was simply cash income, which made sense in the early 60s, but makes no sense today. If a family receives food stamps, it doesn't count against their poverty measure. If a family receives an EITC refund check, it doesn't affect whether they're poor or not. If a disabled individual starts to receive Medicaid and pays less in out-of-pocket expenses, it doesn't count for whether or not they're poor. Clearly, this cash-based income definition of resources is simply insensitive to many of our most important anti-poverty policies. Why is this a problem? It's a problem because it leads us to misinterpret the effect of these policies. In 1988, President Reagan declared, "We declared war on poverty and poverty won." Well, if you look at our official statistics, that looks right, but the official statistics are wrong. In a very fundamental way, our poverty statistics have failed us and made it easy to claim that public spending on the poor had little effect. The National Academy measure, which was developed in the early 1990s, was developed by a panel of which I and Sheldon were both members that spent 2 years reviewing the research and developing a new recommendation for how to measure poverty in a modern and updated manner. Since then, broad support has emerged within the social science community on the approach that the National Academy suggested. The Census Bureau has developed alternative measures, and research papers have discussed how to make these measurements and how to actually implement them. As Mr. Levitan is going to testify, New York City has already done this. Mr. McDermott's draft legislation, the Measuring American Poverty Act of 2008, is an effective way to move the poverty research agenda forward. It proposes to commission the Census Bureau to develop a modern poverty measure based on the NAS recommended approach, to publish these numbers regularly, to update them with new data, and as new statistical approaches become available. This is what we do with all of our economic statistics. It's an historical accident. The poverty measurement sits essentially inside the Office of Management and Budget, defined by an OMB statistical directive. That means any change to this measure must be made through the Executive Office of the President. And any president or president's office, Democratic or Republican, is very reluctant to revise and change a sensitive government indicator. There is no other major economic statistic defined by OMB directive. They are all under the control of U.S. official statistical agencies, and the poverty measure should also be in this situation. We should not get derailed in the discussion about poverty in arguing over whether poverty is actually higher or lower. Yes, it does matter in terms of general appearances, but the most important thing about a poverty measure is not its absolute level, but how it tracks changes over time. Whether it shows when policy changes, when the economy changes, whether our most disadvantaged population are improving or deteriorating in terms of their economic situation. The modern poverty measure proposed by the National Academy of Sciences reflects the best consensus about how to improve poverty measurement in the U.S. Since proposed, we have a decade of research showing how this recommendation can be effectively implemented. If we want to track the well-being of America's families and effectively measure the real effects of our anti-poverty policies, we must update and modernize the measure of poverty in the United States. It is long past time to make that change.